Hey guys, it's Emily. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to make a woven wall hanging and a loom out of cardboard. Let's get on with the video. The first thing you're going to make is the loom, and you want to start by measuring out a piece of cardboard that's the shape of a rectangle and larger than what you want your wall hanging to be. Or you can just measure out a piece of cardboard that's around the same size as mine. My piece of cardboard measures about 9 by 7 inches. When you're done measuring it out, you want to cut it out. After you're done cutting it out, you want to cut 2 more pieces of cardboard. One will measure about 8 by 1 inches, and the other will measure about 8 by ½ inches. The size of both of these will depend on how big you make your cardboard loom. Once you're done cutting out your 3 pieces of cardboard, you want to take a ruler and a pencil and take your loom and make some marks that measure 1/4 inch apart on both of the shortest ends of the cardboard. After you're done making the marks, you want to cut about a ½ inch down on each mark. When you're done cutting each mark, you want to take some thin yarn and wrap it around each mark by putting the end of the yarn in the first mark and make sure you leave some extra hanging off. Then you want to move the yarn to the opposite cut and wrap it around, pulling it back up to the next cut. You want to repeat these steps until you're done and make sure you have an even amount of yarn on the loom when you're done. I did skip the first mark and 2 on the end because the cardboard was too thin and I needed an even amount of yarn on the loom. So you can do this too if you need to. When you're done wrapping the yarn on the loom, you want to tape the ends of the yarn on the back of the cardboard. Now before you start to weave, you want to take the largest piece of cardboard that you made after the loom and weave it through by going under and over until you reach the end. When you're done weaving it through, you want to push it to the bottom. Then you want to repeat the same steps for the other piece of cardboard that is the smallest, but you want it on the top, and this will be used to lift the yarn up and help you weave. Now you want to get the yarn you would like to use on the bottom and a paper clip, and you want to take the end of the yarn and run it through the paper clip. This will help you weave the yarn easier. After you're done running the end of the yarn on the paper clip, you can cut a long piece of yarn. I just estimated how long I would need it, but you want to make sure it's not too long to work with. When you got your yarn ready, you want to flip up the cardboard that's at the top so it's standing up. Then you want to take your paper clip with the yarn and weave it through by starting from the right by going under and over. When you get to the end, you want to pull your yarn, but you want to leave about 2 inches on the other side. Then you can push it down next to the large piece of cardboard. After you push the yarn down, you want to lay the cardboard at the top back down. Now to go back the other way, you want to start weaving on the opposite side of the yarn that you ended on. For example, I ended the first row over, so I went under to start creating the second row. Before you pull the yarn all the way, you want to leave a loop from the side you came from, because when you press the yarn down, the yarn will get too tight. After you're done creating the loop, you can press the yarn down, and if you need to, you can pull the yarn tighter if it's too loose. All you have to do now is repeat the same steps for any additional rows you want. And remember, this section will be covered by fringe, so don't make it too big. When you get to the height that you want to cut your yarn with about 2 inches left over. And you'll be fixing this in the end, so you can let it hang off for now. Now you can start making the fringe. You want to start by taking a piece of yarn and folding it in half, and lay it over the yarn you already have to see how long you would like it to be. Then you want to cut as many as you would need, and you'll need a piece of yarn for each 2 strands of yarn that's on the loom. When you're done cutting your yarn, you want to fold one in half. Then you want to take the loop and run it under 2 pieces of yarn and pull the 2 ends through the loop. All you have to do now is repeat the same steps until you're done. When you're done, you want to push the fringe down so it's more straight. Now you can create your next section by cutting a long piece of yarn and running the end of the yarn through a paperclip. Then you want to repeat the same weaving steps you did earlier, like in the first section that's under the fringe. I decided to make this section into a rectangle shape, but you can create any shape that you would like. When you like the size, you want to cut off what you don't need, but make sure you leave about 2 inches left over, and you'll be fixing this in the end. Now you can get your next color of yarn and get it ready to weave. You can either make the next color a rectangle, or you can make it into a triangle. I'll be making a triangle, so I'll be showing you how to make that. You want to start by weaving the first row from the right. After you're done pushing the yarn down for that row, you want to weave from the left, but you don't want to weave on the last 2 rows on the right. All you have to do now is that you want to repeat these steps until you're done. But each time you go from the left to right, you want to leave an extra 2 rows empty. So you'll end up creating an angle. When you're done, you can cut off the yarn you don't need, but make sure you leave about 2 inches left over. And you can tape it down so it's not in your way for the next section. For the next section, all you have to do is that you want to take your next color of yarn and fill in the next triangle section. When you're done, you can cut off the yarn you don't need, but make sure you leave about 2 inches left over. I did have to wrap the yarn around the last row of yarn I was weaving on because I wasn't sure if it would stay. So you can do this if you need to, or you can just add an extra row. The next thing you can do is that you can weave another section. I decided to use the same yarn I used for the fringe, and I also tried to keep it loose instead of tight, so it would look more fluffy instead of flat. Now when you're done with that section, you can create another section if you have room left. And you may need to take out the piece of cardboard that you used to lift up the yarn because it may not have any more room. When you're done weaving, you can cut the loops that's on the loom and under the fringe. Then you can flip the wall hanging over, but you want to keep the other end on the cardboard for now, and you want to tie the yarn you just cut into knots. After you're done tying the yarn into knots, you can trim the yarn you just made into knots, but make sure you don't cut them too short. When you're done, you can tie the extra pieces of yarn that were used to weave to another piece of yarn that was used to weave into knots, or you can just weave them in. Then you can trim the yarn you just made into knots, but make sure you don't cut them too short because it may come undone if it's too short. The next thing you want to do is that you can carefully pull the rest of the wall hanging off of the cardboard. I did have 2 extra pieces of yarn that were not loops, but to fix this, I was able to tie them into loops. I did this by tying a knot first, and then I tied a loop. When I was done making the loops, I tied every 2 loops together so the last section I weaved would stay together. Then I trimmed the extra yarn from the loops I created. Now something optional you can do is that you can add some sequins, or if you don't want to add sequins, you can go on to the next step. If you want to put some sequins on, you want to start by laying out some sequins where you want them to go. I used silver sequins and white thread, and I put the sequins over the white triangle section. Now to sew each sequin on, you want to run a needle with thread on it through the back of your wall hanging and the sequin. Then you want to go through the front of the wall hanging so one side of the sequin stays down. Then you want to go back through the back of the wall hanging and the same sequin, and sew the other side of the sequin down by running the needle through the front of the wall hanging. Now while you're doing this, make sure you're sewing the sequins around a piece of yarn so they stay on. When you're done sewing a sequin on, you want to tie the thread into a knot on the back of the wall hanging and trim off the extra thread. All you have to do now is repeat the same steps for the other sequins. When you're done putting the sequins on, or if you decided not to put sequins on, you can run a wooden dowel through the loops. Then you want to take another piece of yarn and tie each end of the piece of yarn on each end of the wooden dowel to make a loop so you can hang it when you're done. The last thing you want to do is that you want to trim off the extra yarn from the fringe to make it more even, shorter, or you can cut it into any shape that you would like. Then you're all done. And that's how you make this woven wall hanging. In the comments down below, let me know what you think about this DIY. And if you like this video, subscribe to see more videos. I will see you in the next video. Bye!